Good morning, everyone. Welcome to Teachers Talk podcast brought to you by TalentHut TESOL Academy. Today's guest is Courtney Bailey. She's an instructional designer and an English language specialist whose work spans higher education, K to 12 teacher training, and also international education. As a U.S. Department of State English Language Specialist and Fellow, she has collaborated with universities, ministries of education, and teacher networks around the world. Her expertise includes EFL, EAP, ESP, test preparation, curriculum, and accessible course design, all grounded in learner-centered and culturally responsive teaching. She's currently completing her PhD in education. She's actively involved in leadership roles with TESOL and NAFSA. Courtney, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you today here.
Thank you. It's so good to be here.
Yeah. Our first question is, you've taught, Courtney, and designed programs across different contexts. As I mentioned earlier, universities, K-12 schools, teacher training programs, and international projects. When you look back, what experiences most shaped the teacher you are today?
There are many, but what stands out to me is the fact that I have had multiple experiences. And so realizing that I didn't have all the answers because I look back and I have been in lots of different spaces. So I've taught across age groups, right? I've taught across countries and systems. And so I think in doing that, it did help me realize, it humbled me and offered a lot of humility, but it also helped me realize that students, long before they have that title of student or learner, they are people first.
Yeah.
And so when we internalize that students are people first, we can start teaching with them rather than at them. So that was probably most formative for my educational and teaching experiences.
Yeah. So the core is that we're humans in the end.
Exactly.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Courtney, was there a moment in your career when your understanding of good teaching fundamentally changed? And if yes, what triggered that shift?
Absolutely. So we always are looking for these indicators. We're teaching to a test or we're teaching for a particular grade. And that's how I started too, because that's what I learned to do. But what I realize is that we shouldn't be doing that. We have students that are coming to us with a variety of different perspectives and a variety of different needs. And when I center the student rather than the content, that is what really made my learning and my teaching come to life for my students. So, like I said, the teaching to a test and teaching to a grade, certainly indicators, but I want to be impactful with my students. And so when I really realized that this is going to be impactful, this is going to be long lasting, how can I really do that? And when I started thinking like that, then my my teaching, I'm sorry, shifted. So that was probably the most important shift for me in recognizing that good teaching is not just grades and tests, but people, students.
Exactly. Like even students themselves, when they feel that they are the center of the teaching and learning
Mhm.
process, they give
Mhm.
more. So we're not just
Exactly.
learning to set an exam, we're learning to learn the skills, the language, the culture, the personality behind the language.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Courtney, you describe teaching as collaborative, co-constructed process. Please
Mhm.
share a classroom or training experience where learners reshaped your thinking as much as you reshaped theirs.
Sure. Well, and that's actually my teaching philosophy. So when someone asks me what my teaching philosophy is, I always say that teaching is reciprocal, right? It should not be a monologue. And so what I've realized is that, again, going back to that humility is when I've been specifically in like teacher training sessions, teachers are very vocal about what works and what does not. And so I need to, receive that and come up with a better, a solution, a better way of doing things. And so that's really been helpful when I can stop and slow down, receive information, and then kind of re-engage or redirect what we're doing so that way it actually is useful and relevant. I think a lot of the times, regardless of the age of the student, whether they're young learners or, middle ages, high school or beyond, I think a lot of the time students want to feel involved and
Mhm.
feel heard and seen in the learning process. And so I do my best to make sure that it is a reciprocal learning environment.
Yeah, I love the word heard. It
Hmm.
is a big word. Like everybody
Yeah.
wants to be heard, right? Whether
Hmm.
it's their needs, their maybe like the learning process itself, and this
Hmm.
goes to students' autonomy, right?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Now we're moving to more of like the learner-centered and inclusive teaching in real life,
Hmm. Hmm.
and this is
Yeah.
something very essential in your journey.
Hmm.
You emphasize accessibility,
Hmm.
empathy, and universal design for learning.
Hmm.
What does that actually look like in a real-life English classroom, especially in contexts with limited time or resources? And I guess you mentioned
Absolutely.
teaching in different countries, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. So it looks like remembering that our students walk into our classrooms carrying things that we do not see or things that they do not share with us, right? So they're holding these things. And so how do we actually design our lessons, design our classes to be psychologically safe and to carry the content in a way that the learners can receive it? So I think that looks like stepping away from the frameworks and the science, the educational science, and actually remember again, and there's a theme here that we are teaching learners that are carrying things. So maybe that looks like a learner choice, or maybe that's a difference in pacing, or maybe it's the delivery, maybe it's extending deadlines. Flexibility, of course, is certainly important when it comes to meeting learners where they're at, and that's extremely important too. Is just understanding that learners need to be met where they're at. That doesn't mean level down, your teaching or the content, but rather understanding that they're somewhere and we can meet them and really encourage them to really connect with the content rather than throwing it at them and not being sure whether they're connecting with that content or not.
Yeah. So I see it all goes back to your first point. We are humans in the
Mhm.
end. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
Exactly. Thank you so much.
Hmm.
Um, can you describe a time when designing for accessibility transformed student engagement or outcomes in a way that you did not expect?
So again, it's not one particular time because I've made this something that's consistent now. But
Now,
again, allowing the student to be involved in the learning process. So even when it comes to, we have development, design, and delivery of courses, regardless of the modality. When you can develop a sense of rapport with your students and when you can invite them into those processes, they feel seen and heard. Not only that, I think that it's really easy for us to say, oh, learners this particular demographic of learners or generation of learners just, they don't have the capacity or, we can generalize a lot of statements. That's the easy way. I think that it's really important to understand who our learners are, and especially when it comes to, like I said, demographic,
mhm.
when it comes to their level where they're at, like I said, meeting them where they're at, when it comes to understanding how they learn, their type of learning. So understanding all of these things and really working first. So I think that before we can ever even teach content, we need to make sure that our learners know that we care who they are as people
Yeah.
first, and then also too understanding that we want them to be involved and that this is their learning experience and they can help craft and curate it so that way they're setting themselves up for success.
Yeah. You mentioned the word consistent, which proves
Mhm.
that engagement and the learning outcomes usually increase and they are transformed if the students are the center of the teaching and learning
Mhm.
process.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, thank you so much. Many teachers, Courtney, want to be inclusive, but feel
Mhm.
constrained by curriculum or testing requirements. How have you navigated the tension in your own teaching and design work?
Yeah, and I do acknowledge that. Sometimes it's not easy because we do want to reach every single student and we have goals and aims. We have a job to do at the end of the
Yeah,
day. So I don't want to negate that and say that that's not important. And I do understand that we have institutions and structures that can be very cookie cutter or that can be a one size fits all. But I
mhm,
do um, ask and encourage instructors to politely, push back against that because again, our students will never learn from us if we are so tight within our systems that we cannot pivot and make adjustments when necessary in order to serve them well. So I think some pushback is healthy. And I think that we want to work institutions where there's an open door policy and where we can make some adjustments based on who we know our learners to be. And again, that takes work as the educator in order to get to know them and what works and what doesn't. We should consistently be reflecting and saying, this works, we're going to stay with it. This absolutely does not work. We need to make some changes here. And I think that's where the true learning happens, and that's where we can sustain that.
yeah. And again, we teach by example. We're not just teaching the English skills, we're preparing the students, especially when it
Exactly.
comes to adult learning.
Exactly.
We're preparing them for real life. Yeah, yeah.
Hmm.
Now let's move on to more of global English power and
Hmm.
identity. You've
Sure.
spoken and written about native speakerism,
Hmm.
privilege, and representation in English
Hmm.
language teaching. What
Hmm.
first pushed you to talk about these issues so directly?
Sure. So because of the fact that I was working in these spaces that were not the United States where I'm from, I got to see a lot of different structures and I got to understand how English is received as a global lingua franca. I got to see power structures, biases, and things like this. And I actually I was disheartened and disenchanted to see that many of my very extremely competent colleagues were kind of held back because of maybe passport or accent, or
Yeah,
even not just that, but just the stakeholders. So those that are responsible for hiring these individuals maybe made them feel as though they were not, their English was not credible for whatever reason. And that hurt me because I didn't understand outside of my own context that this was something that was happening.
yeah,
And it also embarrasses me to admit that I didn't realize that I was leaning into my own privilege. And when I say that, I mean, like when I would send out my cover letters and I would say native speaking English teacher. And I don't need to say native English speaking teacher. I'm a competent English teacher. So there's a difference between confidence and competence. And I want both. But I wanted to make sure that I understand what the experiences are of my non-native English speaking teacher counterparts. And I wanted to make sure that I understood that I had privilege and I had a responsibility to use it responsibly.
thank you so much. That is a topic that needs to be, discussed and brought to
Mhm.
the to the spot. Thank you. For
Mhm.
teachers, Courtney, for teachers working in multilingual classrooms,
Mhm.
what does it mean to treat English not just as a skill, but as part of identity and agency?
Yeah. So recognizing that English is not neutral, right? It's tied to opportunity, it's pressures, vulnerabilities. And so we need to understand that. When we understand the weight that this language holds, we can teach it responsibly to the students that are hoping to acquire it. And I think that's it in a nutshell.
Yeah. Now we're moving to my favorite part, AI.
Yeah.
AI, academic integrity, and smarter course design.
Mhm.
You've led workshops on preventing AI misuse
Mhm.
through better assignment design. What is the biggest misconception teachers have about AI in English language learning?
That students will cheat. And it's
Yeah,
really sad. And it's
exactly.
yeah. So I guess in 2023, the very first AI like course that I took as an educator to better understand it, one of the first things that they said that was very impactful to me that I hold on to and I use in all of my teacher training sessions that I lead is that students are now walking into our classrooms and we are suspicious of whether or not they will use AI or not. So they're walking into to us saying they're probably going to cheat. And that's not right, right? So we can understand that AI is certainly useful. It's a tool. There's a lot of things that it can do, but it's our responsibility to say, okay, that you have access to this. I'm going to teach you how to use it responsibly. There's a lot of different ways, and we also have to be honest about the way that we're using it as educators. I use it all the time to, help me draft my emails, to check it, to help me with drafting my lesson plans and things like that. I mean, we use it a lot now, and there's no shame in saying this because we're in the 21st century and we've got a lot of great
Exactly.
things going for us. So there's no shame in saying that, but we also need to be honest with our students and also be willing to teach them how to use it responsibly, not so that it's doing the work for them, but that they're moving and shifting with AI.
Yeah, I really love that because yes,
Mhm,
whenever I talk about AI and that we need
mhm,
to, design a module where our students
mhm,
like really study how to, people
mhm,
are like, no, they're gonna cheat. But we are teachers, we are in the classroom, and we know what
mhm,
our students can really produce. We can
mhm.
tell if this is
Exactly.
AI or not. And
Exactly.
even if they do it through AI, we can still project it, ask them to use
Mhm.
the critical thinking skills and
Exactly.
because again, they should know there are hallucinations, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Exactly. It's teaching about the hallucinations. It's now process over product. At the end, we want something produced at the end. But we do have to now shift as educators and focus on that process. So
Yeah.
if we're using AI, what questions are we actually asking? Are the students actually asking questions of AI? Is there a dialogue or are there commands? Are there imperatives? Right? We want that dialogue. So how do we teach our students what questions to ask to yield the proper questions? Are there hallucinations? What went well? What didn't? What can you change? What can you add? What the final process or the final product, are you happy with it?
Yeah.
How do you know with AI, whether something is good enough or whether we can continue to prompt it in order to help us? And then also using honesty statements. This is
Mhm.
how I used AI, and this is how what worked and what didn't. So there's a lot of things that we can do.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you.
Mhm.
Can you share an example of an assignment redesign reduced AI misuse while actually increasing student thinking and engagement?
Yeah, well, I think it's everything that I just said. So it was when I started to incorporate AI into the assignment design. Not
Mhm.
only that, but asking my students to help me with,
Oh,
how far should we go with this? Yeah. And like I said, whenever I can, I always try to ask them to help me with this design because then they really get into it. They have that autonomy and that sense of ownership. Um, but like I said, if we can start with the design of the assignment and then also step by step, like I said, talking about the process, the honesty statements, the learning how to determine whether something is accurate or not,
mhm.
learning how to extend the conversation. But like I said, making sure that we understand that we should be sharing dialogue with AI rather
Yeah,
than giving it commands because
yeah.
we just don't want simple output, but rather we want the learning to take place within the AI use.
So my understanding now is that you usually let the students use that in the classroom.
That's correct.
Oh,
Mhm.
okay. Okay,
Yes.
cool.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
In the classroom, and if they're using it outside of the classroom, they have to share exactly how they're using it. And a lot of the time, I'll ask for those transcripts, so that way we can
Mhm.
see and then we can correct something that is not appropriate. Or we can say, this was really a great idea. Let's continue.
Yeah. And in the end, they are using the language in the
Mhm.
prompt and the dialogue
Absolutely.
process. Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah. Um,
Exactly.
how do you say AI? How do you see AI fitting into language learning ethically, especially for lingual or lower proficiency learners?
I see this as a teaching assistant, really. Like I said, we are living in the 21st century and I see AI as a tool. I will be honest and say at the beginning, I was afraid of AI and I was like, oh my gosh, this is a catastrophe. Learning is not going to be happening. I am going to be replaced as an educator.
Yeah.
And then I have to remember that my my framework and my teaching philosophy is remembering, humanity. And so, like I said, this is a tool, and we need to be mindful of making sure that we are teaching our students and teaching our counterparts, our colleagues, how to
Yeah.
effectively use this tool. But I don't think that it's going to, if you think about the calculator in the beginning,
Yeah.
when it came to
Exactly.
mathematics, everybody was like, oh my goodness, there's not the real learning isn't going to be taking place. But now we see that we started with a really basic calculator. Now we've got these, amazing graphing calculators, and learning is still taking place as a result, and deeper learning is taking place. What we're able to do and how efficient we are with that learning is taking place. So I think that we need to maybe adjust the way that we think about things, and think about the possibility.
Yeah. So these things are aids. They're not just things that we can depend on completely. This is something that the students also need to understand.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
back to your when you said you were scared that it might replace us as teachers. I heard it in one of the webinars they attended. AI won't replace you. Somebody who uses it the right way will.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Exactly.
yeah.
Exactly. I love that.
Yeah. So now let's move on and talk about teacher development. You
Sure.
work closely with teachers through coaching and faculty development. So
Mhm.
what patterns do you notice among educators who continue to grow versus those who feel stuck?
Yeah, I feel that the patterns with educators that continue to grow, they continue to ask the questions, they continue to put themselves in uncomfortable spaces, and when I say uncomfortable spaces, I mean where they don't know everything and they
Mhm.
don't have all the answers. They're seeking out opportunities to grow and to learn and to better understand things for their students. So again, they're keeping their students in mind in everything that they're doing. Those teachers that get stuck are usually those that want to protect their teaching methods rather than trying to adjust them to serve the learners that they have in their classrooms.
So teacher resistant is there. Yeah,
Mhm.
and there are ways always to, you know, ask the teachers to step out of their comfort zone, as you said, feel
Absolutely.
uncomfortable, to be able to
Exactly.
ask questions and develop for ourselves and for our students as well. Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Mhm.
Courtney, reflective practice shows a lot in your work. What
Mhm.
reflective habit has had the biggest impact on your own teaching over time?
Yeah. I always get into the habit of asking myself, who might this not be working for?
Oh,
And the reason why I say that is because it's really easy to say, oh, this looks good on paper. This is going to work, right? But we want to make sure that we're reaching all of our students, not just the majority or not just half or not just this group, but whose voices are not being centered or whose voices are not being heard or who may not be able to connect with this. And that could be an inclusive issue, that could be an accessibility issue, that could be a like my teaching approach, that could be my material. So if I'm constantly asking this, it it helps me understand how I can adjust my practices in order to better serve my students. In addition to that, every single class period, regardless of what I'm teaching, whether it's a one-time workshop, if it's an ongoing workshop, if it's a English 101 class that meets, Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, I make it a habit of asking my students how they are. And the reason why I ask my students how they are is not just to be nice or anything like that, but rather I ask them to be very honest with me. And if they're stressed, if they're feeling anxious, if they're excited, if there's something, going on, I need to know that as their educator and as someone standing in front of their classroom that has a vested interest in their learning. And if they if the majority of the class tells me that they're stressed and anxious because they have exams coming up, that's probably not the class period that I'm going to give them a lot of heavy material curricula.
oh,
And I need to be able to adjust and pivot based off of the environment that they're coming into me with, right? And of course, we can't do that all the time, but I do let them know I want to set you up for success and not failure in my class. So be honest with me. Let's develop that rapport and let me know what's going on. So if I can reflect on how they're feeling, then okay, today's not the day, but we can do this tomorrow. We can do this in our next
mhm.
class period. So really understanding who they are and what they're coming to you with, and then adjusting is helpful for reflection.
Yeah, I really love that.
Mhm.
So maybe. then the same lesson may be taught in different ways based on the context, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I've had students that have come to me and they've had a lot going on, and I realize they don't necessarily have to do the learning part with me. Like that I can flip the classroom, right? So we can have some conversations and we can activate schemata and start to kind of lean into the direction that we're going. But they're capable, and I think we forget that sometimes. Our students are quite capable if we give them the opportunity to be. So if we need to adjust and do a flipped learning environment for that particular class period or for a period of time, that's okay too. Whatever works and whatever is going to set them up for success is what we should be thinking about.
Thank you so much. For teachers working in difficult or under-resourced contexts,
Mhm.
what helps sustain hope and professional agency?
I think, well, what I've learned are there are so many resources that are available to us. You talk about low resource or no resource, and I've actually given professional development workshops about this because we should not allow a lack of resource to stop
Exactly.
excellence in teaching and learning. And so I think that when we put ourselves in situations where we can do the research on what exists for our students when we are teaching within these particular contexts. And what I've realized is we've got a lot of support and a lot of brilliance out there when it comes to knowing what to do with no resource or low
Mm.
resource environments. A lot of different experts and how we can truly sustain excellence in teaching when we have very little to work with. And one of the resources that I one of the resources that I'm really proud of and just really thankful for is LinkedIn as a community. What I've seen is so many different people share things and share advices and supports with no reciprocity. They're not expecting anything in return. It's just, hey, I recognize that all learners are important and your teaching context is valid and important. This is your reality. Let me see if I can help you, and
Yeah,
people come to your aid. And I just love that about English language teaching and our field is that we are extremely enormously tremendously resourceful, and many people are willing to share. So that I think is what sustains hope for me.
yeah. And we like I always remember when I first started learning English back in the days, like our teachers barely had anything, right? Like no resources,
Exactly.
just the textbook. And we still learn
Mhm.
the language. Like I'm talking about myself. I learned the language. I love the language and I love
Mhm.
what's behind, like the culture behind the language. So
Exactly.
yeah, yeah. The last part is about your advice and your vision. So if you could redesign English language education globally, what is one
Mhm.
shift you would prioritize first and why?
Sure. I would certainly prioritize eliminating the hierarchies and, the kind of like the power dynamics that come with English language teaching and English language learning as well. We're so busy determining whose language or whose English is valid and whose isn't, that we're forgetting that learning should be taking place. We're gatekeeping, and there are so many teachers that are just, like I said, brilliant, and they're doubting themselves because of the fact that we have these hierarchies and these power structures that should not exist. So I would work first on dismantling these systems so that way we can increase the confidence of all educators, regardless of where they're from, regardless of the English that they're speaking, so that way we can get back to the real job teaching English as a global lingua franca.
Yeah. What advice would Courtney give to English teachers who want to move into leadership, curriculum design, or international work, but don't know where to
Mhm.
start?
Yeah. Again, lean into those groups and those educational places where you have other people that can serve as a mentor or as a guide that are willing to share their work with you or their resources. I think that's so important. And don't be afraid to ask the questions. I often go into spaces, probably weekly, where I have so much imposter syndrome. And I'm thinking, what am I doing here? There are people in this room that are just so profound and so
Yeah.
impactful. I what am I doing here? I probably ask myself this every other day, but we need to lean into those experiences because eventually we get comfortable with being in those spaces and we get comfortable asking the questions and we're modeling for our students. I don't think that we should always be the smartest person in the room. We should be seeking out opportunities where we feel uncomfortable because why? We don't want to be uncomfortable. We don't like that discomfort and that forces us to grow, to research, to seek out opportunities that help us feel comfortable in the spaces that we're occupying. And that confidence trickles down to our students. So certainly seek out those opportunities, but don't be afraid to be in spaces that feel like you're not ready to be in them yet.
Yeah. That really happened to me when I first started using LinkedIn. Back to your
Oh,
talk about LinkedIn. And I'm like, oh my God, these titles and these people, they know a lot.
mhm.
What am I doing here? And
Exactly.
then I'm like, let me
Exactly.
read what they have to share. That's a good start, right? Yeah.
Exactly.
Finally, last but not least, what is the question you think English teachers should be asking themselves more often, but usually they don't? Other than the important question that you shared, like who would this not work for? Yeah. What is
Yeah.
the question?
Um, I think the question that should be asked over and over and over every single day is, am I focusing on the material or am I focusing on the people learning it? And again, it comes back to humanity again. Am I focusing on the material? Am I focusing on the people that are learning it? Because it's really easy to get lost in all of that and forget, especially, we're working with robots and AI and all these different
Yeah.
things. And even with the material, a lot of the time, we're starting to see how we can use different ways of AI and things like this in order to build the material. So it's really easy to get caught up in all of that, but remember we need to center our learners over and above anything else.
Yeah. Okay. Courtney, thank you for sharing your insights, experiences, and your generosity with us today. Your work always reminds us that English language teaching is not just about the language, it is more about access, identity, and possibility. To our listeners all over the world, thank you for tuning into podcast today. If this conversation resonated with you, then take one idea and try it in your classrooms. Small shifts really matter. Courtney, thank you so much again. And
Thank you.
a pleasure and an honor to be with you today. And of course,
Likewise.
we're on LinkedIn now, so I'll be asking
Yay!
questions. Thank you so much. Enjoy the rest
Awesome.
of your day. Bye
Thank you, you
bye.
too. Bye bye.